All right, stand for the pledge, please. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. This is Monday, January 16th. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, come up to this microphone, give us your name and address, and state your business. Call the roll, please.
Peter.
Here.
Galler.
Here.
Kufa.
Here.
Laporte.
Here.
Hall.
Present.
Bolts.
Here.
Lott.
Here.
All present, Your Honor.
Thank you. Go to consent agenda. It's A, City Council minutes of January 3rd, 2023, regular meeting recommendation approved, and Planning Commission minutes, December 14th, 2022, meeting recommendation received.
Motion to approve A and B is presented.
Support. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? A public hearing tonight. I'm going to open a public hearing on our Parks and Recreation Plan. Therese?
Thank you, Mayor Cedar. On behalf of the City of St. Clair Recreation Commission, this public hearing is for our recreation plan. It's a 5-year plan required by the DNR. A 30-day review was posted starting December 8th for anyone to provide input on the plan. And a presentation was made at the December 19th City Council meeting. And at that same time, we scheduled this public hearing. We did not receive any public input. The only recommended changes to the plans were more in the form of corrections, and those were all submitted in-house by administration. So there was some grammatical, font, and map corrections to the plan. And we had our regular Recreation Commission meeting today at 4 o'clock, and they have reviewed and also approved the plan and recommended for approval to City Council.
Please help me out here because I'm having a memory thing. Was this the plan that we talked a little bit about the dredging of the harbor? Was that something else?
The harbor has a section included in the plan, and there was you made the one suggestion that about the high water, so that was corrected.
Yeah, the low water, but yeah.
The low water, excuse me.
All right, well, thank you.
Yes.
So, anything from the public on this plan? Council? Okay, I guess you all set?
Yes, and then we'll be back later on the agenda for the resolution for final
right.
approval by City Council.
Thank you. I'll close the public hearing. We'll move to 6A, presentations, water treatment plant improvement funding, Miller Canfield.
Good evening. I'm Tom Coles with Miller Canfield. So I represent the city as your bond counsel. So when it comes to issuing bonds, our expertise is the financing statutes of the state of Michigan and federal income taxation. So as part of that, we actually prepare all the necessary documentation, resolutions, ordinances, and prepare the actual documents themselves, and ultimately issue an opinion to whoever buys the bonds that the bonds are legal, valid, and binding obligations of the city and exempt from state and federal income tax. So as part of that, we work closely with the city's administration, superintendent and clerk and finance director in structuring the bond issues and going through the necessary process and setting a schedule out for when bonds get issued. So the project that I'm talking about tonight is the project that the city has submitted a project plan to the state of Michigan, the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy for the water treatment plant. So the state has a program, actually 2 programs. One, the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, that's really sewage disposal systems, and then Drinking Water Revolving Fund. And that's what this water treatment plant would qualify for, is potential funding under that state program. And over the years, this is a very popular program that the state puts together because part of the money that's provided is subsidized by the federal government. So the interest rate that the city pays is typically lower than a market interest rate. So I'll go through a little bit. I believe you have the handouts that were just handed out to you and we can talk about this project. So the project itself has an estimated cost. Again, the project hasn't been bid yet, so as estimated by the engineers, the project was estimated at $10.935 million. And a portion of that qualifies through the drinking water program for funding. So the goal would have been for all of it to qualify through the state program for funding, but what typically happens is each year, various communities throughout the state submit these project plans to Eagle. Eagle reviews them and has a point system as to how these projects get ranked on various matters, and the city was ranked high enough to be in what they call the fundable range. So as you list them all, and actually the state puts together a project priority list that lists all the communities that submitted projects and applications for funding, and the city of St. Clair was the last one that was on the fundable range. So the goal was to get the project fully funded, but since it was the state caps how much they're willing to fund, the city's portion was partially funded and not fully funded because they met the cap halfway through your project. So we'll talk about kind of the three sources of funding, potential funding for the project, and what that process involves. So if you look at, again, so the first page was, again, the total estimated cost as prepared by Fishbeck was $10,935,000. Portion of it qualifies through the drinking water program. Very briefly on the drinking water program, typically, the drinking water program is a loan from the state to the city. And the city issues bonds to document that loan, because pursuant to state law, the city just can't get a loan. It has to actually issue its own debt. So the loan that usually the state provides a loan for the full amount of the project. Here, since there are federal dollars available to fund portions of projects, part of this project, 25% of the project qualifies for a grant using the American Rescue Plan funds. So if you looked at the total 10.9, the city qualifies for a $2.7 million grant from the state. So that's money you don't have to borrow. That's just grant funding. So we would look to the remaining portion of the project to actually borrow funds, some from the state that qualifies for the program, and the rest of it would have to be outside of the program because, again, the state has limited the amount of funding for the project.
Tom, do you
Yes.
have questions now or at the end?
Anytime.
Okay.
So, yeah, if any of this gets confusing, fire away.
I'm with you. I just have
Yes.
something's been stewing in me for a while. I need to know who to be mad at. When we applied for this state revolving fund, we were initially in the bracket of fully funded.
Correct.
Then, due to some other communities, projects status changing or whatever happened with them, we were bumped. Is there any logic to us, since we're only getting partial now, to take the partial now and then next year reapply to try to get the rest and get bumped up again, or am I just way out there?
You're not way out there. The concern with that, so here's the reason we understand that the adjustment was made as to where the city was in what I call the fundable range, right? So each year, these projects are segmented in different quarters to close, right? Last year, there were a lot of projects that flowed through the SRF program, and some of them that were scheduled for the last fiscal year quarter for the state, which is, they call quarter 4 or 4.5, which again, that means the state's fiscal year obviously is October 1 to September 30. So those projects were expected to be bid and then bonds issued and closed prior to September 30th. My understanding is a number of those projects got delayed and flowed into this, so weren't being able to be funded in that fiscal year. So those projects moved to this current fiscal year, the 22-23 fiscal year, and got reallocated amongst the whole projects that were first applied for 22-23. So because some of those projects moved over and they had a higher point total, they moved up on the list and moved the city further down the fundable range. That's my understanding. So it's basically delays caused by other communities' projects that were already in the fundable range for the prior fiscal year, moved to this fiscal year, and then they reallocated the points, and the city got moved down the list to basically the bottom of that fundable range, where only a portion of the project could be funded through the state.
So building off this question and your answer, if we go the route of issuing the bonds and going through and financing half of this ourselves next year, does that eliminate us from submitting this again to get those funds? And then how would that affect these programs that we're putting in place? Can we pay them off? Can we get out of them?
So those are great questions. So the concern is if you decide, and you can decide, like, we don't want to fund the whole project now, right? We'll fund what we have within the fundable range. If the project can be split, then you could decide to reapply for next year. The question is, you have no idea what other communities are submitting for next year and where the city's project will actually fall within that range. So,
Understood, but is there a way that we can design our funding and our project as we build it and split it, but still apply and have funding mechanisms in place this year? Next year, apply a portion that we're funding outside of what we got funded? You know what I'm saying? And if we get granted that money, can we get out of the programs we entered because we were shorted this year, or this round?
so unfortunately, no. So once we issue, so if you're gonna fund the full project this year, those bonds that we're gonna issue, that the city would potentially issue, you wouldn't be able to pay off right away next year because they have periods of time in which they have to be outstanding. So for example, if we kind of play that out further, so if we look at the three, and I'll get to the question, but it's helpful if you have a good idea as to the three components of the funding sources. So the first source would be the grant funds. So what I wouldn't suggest is, hey, let's just wait to do the whole thing until next year, because we have no idea what grant funding, if any, is available for 23-24 fiscal year, right? So right now, the state has said we can fund 25% of this project through a grant, and you don't have to repay any of that.
Tom, do we run the risk, if we did what we're kind of alluding to here, that we applying, we don't even have the points that we have now?
Correct. Well, or you have other communities that apply that score higher, and you're not even in. So the 2.5 million, so if we have 2.7 for a grant, right now the state says we'll fund another 2.5 million through a loan at a low interest rate, right? So about 2.513 million. They'll loan the city the funds through either a 20 or 30-year financing. What that really means is the city issues a bond for that 20 to 30-year financing, but you know the rate already. Unlike selling bonds out to the market where we don't know who the investor is and what interest rate they'll want to charge, the state program has fixed rates. So the 20-year financing would be at 1.875% if the city chose to do 20-year repayment, or the 30-year repayment is at 2.125%. So either 1 7/8 or 2 1/8. Those are both well below the market rates right now. They're 50% below the market rates right now.
And Tom, are you going to tell us tonight or in the very near future, 1.85, 2.1, what kind of payment that looks like?
Yeah, so my role is your lawyer. So I do documents. You have a financial advisor also, Benzinski and Company, that can put together schedules based upon those interest rates. So you can have an idea as to, do we want to use a 20-year versus a 30-year, and what's that impact on an annual basis cost? Yep. So that leaves a little over 5.5 million not funded through the drinking water program, right? Either through the grant or through this loan. So if the city wants to fund the whole project, it would issue its own bond, a capital improvement bond that the city would actually issue directly and sell to the market, right? So when I say sell to the market, so we would, with your financial advisor, put together documentation to sell the bonds, either through a competitive sale, which is you publish a notice in the bond buyers as a national publication, sell bonds to anybody that's willing to buy them at the lowest rate. So whatever investment banking firm submits bids on that day and it produces the lowest true interest cost to the city would award to that and then issue those bonds to that particular purchaser. So they would provide the funding for that one piece. So there's the three components then, right? You have the grant, you have the drinking water bond, and then you have the capital improvement bond that would cover what the state's not covering. And that would also have, the city could choose its repayment. Up to 30 years for the capital improvement bond. We can issue up to 30 years for state law. I would suggest the same thing for that, to have Benzinski and Company run you various schedules based on 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, so you can see what that annual payment looks like. I talked to them earlier today, and they estimated the 20-year rate would be somewhere around 4% if it was sold today. And the 30-year would be somewhere around 4.5% if it was sold today. Again, markets move, so that rate could fluctuate. We won't know that rate until we actually sell. Unlike the drinking water bond, we know exactly what that rate is because the state has set that rate, and that's a fixed rate. So we wouldn't know the rate until we actually sold the bonds on the capital improvement bonds piece. But it would hopefully be in that range. But you can see that's the interest cost is twice as much, or the rate is twice as much as what the state program would provide for. So it is beneficial to the extent that the city qualifies for funding through the state to utilize that because it's going to be much better than the market rate. So the process for issuing those, if there's any, so that's the 3 buckets potentially, right? And so delay could have an impact on the first 2 buckets, right? Whether it's the grant funding or what the city qualifies through the loan program, the drinking water bond program, that could impact whether any grant funds are available next year or where the city ranks on that priority list and whether it can get within the range that the state has funding available for. And the rate can change next year too. The interest rate in which the state charges. Now, it's not going to change. It wouldn't change significantly. It hasn't changed significantly from year to year. I think the highest the state's rate has been is 2.5% in the almost 30 years I've been practicing. So they're still very, good rates, better than market rates going through the state program if they're willing to fund the project. So that's probably not a significant difference that you'd want to try to test the market and say, hey, let's just do this all through the market if we think the rates are going to be better.
So, can we sell bonds before we know what the project it goes out to bid and is actually going to cost?
No, so that's a great question. So that's segue to the next page. So the process. What's the process? What's the timing? What's the schedule? So the state, since it has all these programs or all these cities looking to issue debt, has through Eagle a milestone schedule, and they'll say the city agrees with Eagle. Okay, we're going to fund this during this particular quarter, and you pick a quarter depending upon when it can get designed, engineered, bid, and when do we think we can get all the documentation in order. The state right now has a Q4 milestone schedule signed with Eagle. What that means is it's anticipated if the city continues to proceed through the process and looking for funding through the state, that we kind of work our way backwards. The fourth quarter closing would be August 28th of 2023. So how do we get there? Prior to actually closing, the milestone schedule actually has the project being bid beginning in May of 24 with bid opening June 26th. So you'd know the cost of the project by June 26th of 2023. And then the city would make a determination, do I want to proceed? So there's no commitments made or obligations to issue, and we wouldn't sell bonds until after the project has been bid.
So the state's going to have 2 more fiscal years before we start this project.
2 more quarters.
2 more quarters.
Quarters, yeah.
Okay.
So all within the same fiscal year for the state. So we actually have I'm working with other communities that they broke, instead of just the 4 quarters, since there's so many projects going through the state the last few years, they've now segmented into half. So I have a 2.5 quarter one that's already in the works. I've got a Q3 that's already in the works. But most of the projects that the state are doing this year, because of the timing, are going to be pushed back to Q4. So of the 12 different deals I have lined up right now, 10 of them are fourth quarter milestone schedules. So the idea is the spring is getting bid packages ready together, design, and then in May, projects out to bid, get the bids in June, authorize them if communities want to move forward, get the documentation ready with the state, and close at the end of August. So what in closing means funds are available to be drawn from the state at that time. So to get to that, so we have the state's program, there's really two segments. There's the engineering side of it, so the Eagle piece of it that has the milestone schedule. So they're the ones that have all the requirements and put the project priority list and rank the projects based upon the systems and their needs. And then there's the financing part of it. The state, through the Michigan Finance Authority, is actually the one that buys the city's bonds. That has the loan piece. The state uses the term loan, but think about it, they're buying the city's bonds. So the Michigan Finance Authority, the financing schedule is kind of layered on top of the engineering schedule, and they work in parallel tracks. So what we'll try to do is make sure that all of the requirements that the city needs to satisfy issuing bonds under state law are met within these time periods. And so the process for the two series of bonds are very similar, even though they're going to be slightly different structured. One's going to go to drinking water, one would go out to the market. The process under state law is the same. So you would start with, the council would adopt a resolution authorizing the publication of a notice of intent to issue bonds. So 1-page notice, actually it would be a quarter page in the local paper, but it basically indicates the city intends on issuing bonds in a dollar amount not to exceed X amount of dollars for financing, a portion of the cost of the project, and we would describe the water treatment project in that notice. It also indicates that the source of repayment, rates and charges of the system, whether the city's pledging its full faith and credit to support them, or if it's just pure revenue bonds. And with each notice includes a right of referendum. So the city can issue bonds without a vote if no petition is filed within 45 days of when the notice is published in the paper. And that petition would have to be signed by at least 10% of the registered electors of the city within that 45-day period. So
10% of the registered voter, or 10% of the number that voted in the last government election?
registered electors at the last election. So, yep. So, again, so if we pass by that period of time, the project gets bids come in, we come back to council for actually authorizing the issuance of the bond. So publishing the notice doesn't commit the city to do anything. It just says, we intend on issuing these bonds, and we want to provide for the statutory right of referendum associated with that. You don't have to, if a petition comes in, a proper petition, then you can't issue those bonds without putting it to a vote. So that would basically delay the project, and that would push you out to the next to the next fiscal year, right? So if you had to put it to a vote, that would certainly be the delay in the process. But if no petition gets filed within that time period, once the bids come in, the engineers would come back to council to review bids, and then we would also bring, authorizing ordinance or resolution authorizing the issuance of each series of the bonds. And then for the drinking water piece, we already know that the state's buying them, so you don't have to worry about marketing and selling them. You just fit within their regular schedule. That would then close on August 28th. For the capital improvement bonds, since we're selling them out to the market, after we council authorizes the issuance of the bonds, then the bonds are marketed and sold, that interest rate determined, and then we would close that bond issue. And I would guess we'd close it relatively around the same time that the drinking water bond issue would close, which would be, again, August 28th. So the processes are almost identical except for who's buying the bonds and where we're selling and when that rate is determined.
Based on, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Nope, go.
I was going to ask what your goal date is for your 45-day referendum to begin.
So the question becomes, as we work our way backward, we want that to be done prior to, or sometime around, it can be done when bids come in, so we can get it going. There's no time period associated with, you don't have to issue within a certain period of time once the notice is published.
So that doesn't have to be expired before you go to bid the project.
It doesn't, but a lot of times you typically want it to be done, because if you think if you know you're going to have a petition and you're going to vote, then sometimes you don't even want to go out and bid the project because you're going to be delayed you won't be able to issue the bonds in a timely fashion.
Yeah, because of that fourth quarter, this means that it's do or die for us, right? Because otherwise it gets pushed into the next fiscal year for our project, correct?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that's what most of the communities are in that exact
Yeah.
same position of, hey, if the timing doesn't work out for this, you're into the next fiscal year.
So are we behind the ball here? Or
No,
is it
not at
just
all.
what everybody's, okay.
This is, I mean, this, you're actually, I mean, we're right on schedule.
Okay.
Yep. So because that is not a very, you have till May, right, to get to the bidding process. You know, it takes a resolution of council to approve the notice to be published. It gets published in the paper probably within a week of when it gets, and then you're 45, month and a half, you're done
Yeah.
with that. So,
Okay.
so if council wanted us to bring the resolutions in February, you'd be done with the notice by April. Certainly before the project was bid.
Okay.
So you could even, if you wanted to, maybe delay another month. But again, there's no, it doesn't have to be within a particular time period. Sooner rather than later is kind of how we
Yeah.
like to deal with this, because once it's there and done, then you can check
can
that
move
off the
on.
box and move
Yep.
forward.
Gotcha.
And make decisions based on the laundry list of other decisions you'll have to make going forward.
Are you done?
I'm done, actually. Yeah. Sorry. I could talk all night, but I don't think you want me to. I said I could talk all night, but I don't think you want me
Yeah,
to.
this is better than Netflix, I'm telling you.
Yeah,
right now. See, was anybody more questions? I guess I'm not, if this is the last question, maybe it's not, but, so looking at the bond market out there right now, and I'm just gonna say, what you're taking the bonds, selling them out as municipal bonds to people walking the street.
So technically, no. I mean, we're selling to, well, we are publishing a notice that says, hey, we're going to sell $5.8 million worth of bonds, and you have to bid on all of them. So we're not going to take, these bonds are going to be in $5,000 denominations. We're not taking 20,000 bids, right? So we want one investment banking firm to say, I'm buying all these bonds at this rate. So they will then in turn sell bonds to whomever their customers are, right? Some investment banking firms deal with, insurance companies or large, institutional investors. Some of them actually deal more with retail, which we're retail. We call them the mom and pop, people that are buying bonds in $5,000 denoms or $10,000 pieces for whatever investment purposes. But the city doesn't deal directly with them.
No.
We deal with whatever the investment bank is that's buying all the bonds. They're providing the funds to us, and we don't really care who they sell them to. We want the lowest interest rate.
Well, that was my
That they'll
question,
provide
was
to
the
the
way the
city.
bond market is going right now, I feel like it's going up. Does that mean that when we get to the goal line here, we're gonna be looking at 4.5%, 5%?
Again, I'm a lawyer, not a financial advisor, but even your financial advisors would say, no one has a crystal ball, but the market actually has gotten better over the last, I'd say 2-3 months. And there's lots of factors that go into the interest rate, right? The Fed, what's the Fed going to do? Are they going to continue to increase, the rates, or are they going to tamper down? Are we going to get into a recession? This is a bad thing to say, but a recession would actually improve the bond rates, right? So that could help the city. Not that we all want to, root for a recession. So the market's kind of finicky, but you could see that predicting the rates. I don't think that you actually might be in a pretty decent position in 5-6 months.
I like to hear.
Where rates could be better. There's so many external factors that could impact the rate, but I don't think everybody thinks that the rates are just going to continue to go up, because we've actually seen them come down from last fall.
Thanks.
Yep.
Anybody else? All right, it was fascinating, thank you.
My pleasure.
I mean, it's very interesting, and these are big numbers for us. It's a huge project.
Well, these are big numbers we're seeing this across the board. So I think you're not alone. You're not alone. I mean, I have 8 other colleagues in my office that do this exact same thing and have, the same number of clients that they're working with in this pool. So there's a ton of communities that are trying to get access to these funds because they're available, and the grant funding is unique. So to the extent that you can, it is a big number, but that's what we're seeing for infrastructure improvements, that they got to get done at a certain period of time, and trying to find the best mechanism for financing them.
You guys have somebody that lobbied about Lansing for you?
We do not. Our firm does not lobby. Yeah.
You guys have a suite at Ford Field?
That, we do not have a suite at Ford
All
Field.
right, I
either.
think we're done with this guy. You guys-
We do have we do have something at Comerica Park, though.
I'm just kidding with you.
Yeah,
Jeez.
I don't know if you can answer this and this end of things, but are you seeing or do you foresee an issue with availability of contractors for projects like this, since there's a lot of it going on? I mean, there's only so many Bart Mallows and Black and Veatches, and, you know, this is.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. Again, I'd let your engineers answer that question. They'll have a much better educated answer to that. However, since we're seeing so many projects come through the pipeline, pun intended, I guess, you really are, they're depending upon the location of where these contractors are, there might be, I think that's why we're seeing an increase in some of the costs, not just the supply chain issues, which are a huge issue, but, you know, there's so many projects out there that I don't think some of these contractors are as hungry as they used to be. So you might see some of that on the cost side too. And the number of bids that are getting, that the city could be receiving for projects. So we did see a couple of communities last year, drinking water, where they had to rebid projects because they only got one bid or didn't get bids on a certain aspect of a project. So I think because there's so much money that people are trying to get to and have projects available, that might be an issue going forward. That certainly is a concern.
Tom, I have a question. If you're talking about two separate bonds
Correct.
being issued,
Correct.
okay? And if in the future, say 2 or 3 years from now, we have another large development and we have to go back to the market, by holding debt on two bonds that have to be on the shelf, as you said earlier, for a while, we can't just pay it off right away. Does this hurt or jeopardize our bond rating to do future work?
So many communities have multiple bond issues on their, so the city has 3 outstanding bonds right now, right? So it comes down to a bond rating. One factor is how much debt is outstanding.
Right.
But it's only one factor. There's a multitude of factors that go into a city's rating. A lot of it is geographic location, tax base, various things associated with it that are really outside of the city, the council and your control. But there are other factors, including how much debt do you have outstanding that you somewhat control. So will it have a negative impact? Not necessarily. I mean, it's certainly a consideration that the rating agencies look at to say what kind of debt you have. A lot of times what they're looking at is how much capacity do you have for additional debt? Because when they get concerned is some cities have issued debt, then they get right up to their debt limit because you have a limit under state law and city charter as to the debt limit. And if a city has less flexibility into the ability to issue debt if it needs to for certain purposes, that could then impact the rating. Right now, the city has a very, very low debt profile. I think you have just under $1.5 million of principal outstanding in bonds. So you have plenty of capacity under the limitations that you're authorized to issue that you're allowed under state law. So I do think that is certainly a factor. I don't know if I can't say it'll
Probably
be a
something
negative.
we need to know. What is our ceiling? What is our current ability to pay on that? And what are we forecasting outside of our 10 million? So I love that question. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a great, so what we will do is I'll have the folks at Benzinski prepare that. So as part of the bonds that we actually issue out to the market, there's an offering document that'll be used that it's the prospectus, so to speak, if you think in the stock of it says, here's what these bonds are, here's how they mature, amortization, security, and then also here's information on the city. If you knew nothing about the city of St. Clair, so if I'm living in Minnesota and I said, who is this person? Who is this city? All the information that I need to make an informed investment decision would be part of this document. So there's a segment in them that talks about the city's debt, how much is outstanding, what's their debt margin. So we'll have that prepared and we can present that to council so you can see, hey, if we issue these two pieces and these dollar amounts, how much capacity do we have in the future?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Good. Thanks, Tom.
My pleasure.
Okey dokey. Let's go to number 7. Ordinance Resolution A, Resolution 23-2, Parks and Recreation Plan 23 to 27.
Thank you, Mayor. With the public review of our master plan and the public hearing, the Recreation Commission has fulfilled all the requirements of the plan, and we are now requesting that the City Council consider a resolution adopting the City of St. Clair Parks and Recreation Plan for submission to the DNR, and that is a 5-year plan.
I'll make that motion.
Support.
All right, motion's made, supported. Questions? All right, call the roll, please.
Laporte,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Foltz,
Yes.
Watt,
Yes.
Gottler,
Yes.
Lupa,
Yes.
Cedar.
Yes.
Resolution adopted.
Thank you. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you.
B, Resolution 2303, MDOT Street Administrator.
Yes, this resolution will designate Quentin Bishop as the single street administrator for the city for all transactions with the state transportation department.
So moved.
Support.
Questions? All right, call the roll, please.
Paul,
Yes.
Foltz,
Yes.
Watt,
Yes.
Gottler,
Yes.
Kufa,
Yes.
Laporte,
Yes.
Cedar.
Yes.
Resolution adopted.
Thank you. C, Resolution 2304, approve the poverty exemption policy and guidelines.
Yes, Your Honor. The State Tax Commission requires cities to annually adopt policy and guidelines to be used for poverty exemptions. The city assessor and St. Clair County Equalization Department did update all of our policies and to comply with all of the applicable codes and state recommendations. So the action today would be to adopt the resolution to update those policies.
What is this used for?
The assessor uses these to approve poverty exemptions. So residents can apply for certain tax exemptions.
Just keeping us up to date with the current guidelines.
Yep, it's an annual housekeeping item, so we have the St. Clair County Equalization Department review it, update it for us, and then what you have in front of you is the updated policy.
I move to approve.
I'll support.
All right, motion made, supported. Any questions? All right, call the roll, please.
Foltz,
Yes.
Watt,
Yes.
Gottler,
Yes.
Kufa,
Yes.
Laporte,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Cedar.
Yes.
Resolution adopted.
All right, thank you. Let's go to number 8, Reports of Administration. A, this is our new city superintendent, Quentin Bishop. What do you got to say tonight?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make a quick report, but hopefully it shows the productivity of this week. Thank you all for entertaining the meetings that I've called and for the opportunities to meet everybody and sit down at various times. And I plan on meeting everybody else face to face. City's wonderful, actually. You have wonderful staff, and everybody is very tuned in to the projects that are coming down the road, which is very pleasing to know. Really quickly, Haas Industrial Drive, EPC is no longer eligible for Category A road funding, which at that time means that we need to find other sources of funding to repair that road. The EDA did meet with the team here at the city, and we are gathering cost estimates right now and road frontages in front of the properties to determine what type of assessment, if any, would come about improving that road for Haas Industrial Drive. We also discussed industrial pretreatment programs. This is a reimbursement program affecting Magna. The City of St. Clair can charge reimbursements for invoices, supplies, attorney fees, surcharges, so on and so forth. I am meeting within the next week, hopefully, with David DeGrand. He is the IPP program consultant, and he's going to walk us through that step to make sure that every reimbursable charge we can charge, we will charge. Just a quick note on streets. AEW engineer Ryan Kern and I, we did meet today. We were going to be meeting face-to-face on Wednesday, discuss the annual Act 51 mileage certificate report. A couple corrections need to be made. One, Magna Drive needs to be added, and also Woodland Estates need to be added to the map that is submitted to the state. The revised report will be submitted to MDOT upon completion. St. Clair Water Plant, actually took the tour, went to Shorewell, saw it. It was interesting. Went inside the plant, even more interesting. 1978, is that right? The electronics speak for themselves in there. And so it's to know that this project is moving forward and what Tom, I know he left, but to know that he's helping us through this step. I know that plan is going to see probably well overdue, and it's still working. There's no doubt about that. It's just some of the things inside definitely need upgrading. Something that we did not talk about, but we're moving forward with, is an EPA grant that directly impacts the St. Water Treatment Plant. We talked about tonight, we talked about issuing bonds, we talked about the loans, the American Rescue Plan grant, but we did not talk about an EPA grant. That has been on the books. And so essentially what happens is an EPA grant is issued, and they've said, City of St. Clair, for your water treatment plant, here, you're allocated to this. However, now you need to go through the process to apply for the money to have it released to you. We're going through those steps right now. So when we see that number earlier from Mr. Collis, that total number, he didn't include the nearly $1 million of the grant that we're going after. Okay, so it should reduce our liability for those bonds being issued. Quick conversation about the LDFA. There will be a LDFA meeting scheduled Tuesday, February 14th at 8 a.m. at Flint International Airport to create the St. Clair Development Area, which is a local tax capture jurisdiction in the St. Clair Industrial Park. If anybody's interested in that, I can send them, not a problem. It is a public meeting, Tuesday, February 14th at 8 a.m. Today, we met with members of the I-69 Trade Corridor, the EDA, St. Clair County Legal Counsel, also to discuss the LDFA plan, its implementation, and then all the funding sources available to reduce St. Clair's funding liability. Last but not least, this is related to Magna funding. MEDC has stepped up through a grant for $3.6 million that we have been awarded. It's a reimbursable grant. It's being held by St. Clair County EDA, and it being reimbursable, meaning that whatever the liability is for future programs, $3.6 million is reimbursable for that. Okay. Might be a little longer report than usual, I don't know.
All right.
But that's the wrap up.
Yep. Any questions for Quentin? All right. Up to good work.
Thank you.
City Attorney, you got anything over there?
Nothing this evening, Your Honor.
Any questions for Jim? Any city departments tonight? If I ask her to do something, she won't. This is never answers. I understand that, girl. All right, authorities, boards, commissions, anybody? All right, no, number 9, no unfinished business. Let's go to new business. Approves 2023 authorities, boards, commissions, and appointees. With your endorsement, council, I have the council committee appointments ready, and here they are. Mr. Voles on Historical and Library, Chris Paul to Pine Shores, Mitch Kufa to Harbor and DDA, Michael Port to Planning and Fire Authority, Aaron Gottler to the Cemetery Commission, John Watt to the Recreation Commission. I'll need a motion to yea or nay that.
Motion to approve.
Support.
Questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. B, special event, East China Educational Foundation.
Did you want
I'm sorry.
the other ones?
Thank you. Sorry, Chief. I got some other ones, sorry. Forgot to look at the back. Building Authority, appoint Quentin Bishop, fulfill a 6-year term to expire December 31st, 2025. Cemetery Board of Trustees, reappoint Jennifer McDonald, 3-year term, December 31st, 2025. Dangerous Building Commission, reappoint Judy Shawn, 2 years, December 31st, 2024. Historical District Commission, reappoint Bill Cedar Jr. and Robert Fierhand, each for a 3-year term to expire December 31st, 2025. Recreation Commission, reappoint Karen Foley, 3-year term expires December 31st, 2025. I-69 International Trade Corridor, Michigan Next Development Corporation Board Member, appoint Quentin Bishop and alternate Dan Casey, each for a 1-year term to expire December 31st, 2023. SEMCOG, appoint Quentin Bishop and Michael Port, each for a 1-year term to expire December 31st, 2023. Current vacancies, beautification, Board of Review, Cemetery Board of Trustees, Library, all are available at City Hall or on the city website. I'll need a motion to
So moved.
approve those.
Support.
Questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I'm sorry, opposed? All right. Okay. Thanks for catching that, you guys. Chief, you're up.
Council, I received from the East China Educational Foundation, they are requesting their annual Chili Heart 5K that leaves the middle school and runs through the path and into the Highlands. I recommend you approve it. It'll be on February 11th.
Motion to approve.
Support.
Questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We'll go to C, special events, St. Clair Art Association Art Fair and St. Clair Jazz Fest.
That's two oldies, but they want to combine, so when I became chief 5 years ago, both these organizations came to me and wanted me to close that road for their, and I says, you're not big enough, you're not big enough. Well, I think now that they're combining on August 19th through the 20th, I think they'll be big enough and it gives them room to grow, so we're gonna close the road. They're gonna do what they do and hopefully it grows. I recommend you approve their.
So moved.
I'll support.
Questions?
Yeah, where is your when you're closing this road? Where are you? I guess my question is staging all these artists that are going to be bringing in their materials. You know, all the trailers that they come in with. Having the open road seems to benefit them with all of their wares that they take in and out all the time. How are they going to have access to that without having someone driving down the center of the road we've just closed?
They're gonna have to man it with volunteers, just like boat races. We're gonna give the same footprint boat races get.
Okay,
They're just gonna have to they're gonna have to have volunteers.
so boat races. That's all the way down to Clinton for the closure.
Yes.
So it's closing from Vine,
Brown.
it's closing from Brown.
Yeah, it's just easier with MDOT if we use a footprint that we've used for the last 25 years, then it's an easy approval. So that's the same one for the boat races that we've used, so.
So those two groups are gonna provide volunteers to manage every closed road from
I
Brown
don't
to.
have enough police for it, so, yeah, we'll barricade it off and,
They will be manning the roads. There's one day that everyone will be coming and setting up for the art fair, and then one day when everyone will be leaving. So I think that's the question is how are they going to get in and out? So they will be directed in and out at a particular place, and yes, the volunteers will help with that. There won't be people at every road all weekend. There will be barricades and detour signs,
But that road will be closed all weekend.
Is that a
The easiest-
3-day?
whatever days
it's
the
Saturday,
chief
Sunday.
Just Saturday.
recommends.
I would recommend that we close the road and that they use J Street to get into it, because that's one little place. We can close the road off and they can use J Street to get in and out of the footprint while they're setting up. That's the safest way to do it.
Are they going to be set up before Saturday a.m. then?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're setting up Friday.
So you'll close the road Friday.
Right.
Any other questions?
Those are two big events. It's going to be crazy.
Arts Beats and Eats, Royal Oak, we're gonna knock them off the map.
I guess so.
The motion's made and supported.
Yes.
Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Chief. Goes to claims to council number 11, January 5 and 13.
Hearing no questions, Your Honor, I make a motion to approve as presented.
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are to number 12, public comment. Any non-agenda items? Anybody have anything they want to talk about a little bit? All right, let's go to number 13, Mayor and Council. I have a couple of quick things. Don't forget, the Icy Bazaar is this Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Fireworks are Saturday night, probably around 7:30. Kiss Tribute Band is around 8 o'clock-ish.
That's correct.
Ice carvings.
Fire breathers, all kinds of entertainment. Come on down, check it out.
Check it out.
Is that on Saturday?
Saturday, yeah.
Anybody else have anything they want to?
Hearing nothing else, Your Honor, I make a motion to adjourn.
Support.
All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Have a good night, everyone. Be safe, be careful. Thanks for coming.